Lesson 2. Second Yama is Satya. Satya is truthfulness, or as an extension of non-violence, it's non-lying. Do you tell the truth? You know, when I was a child, we didn't have internet. TV started only at 7 o'clock in the evening. So we were always outside, always playing. And of course, we always came late for dinner. And of course, we always had excuses for that. So my mom used to say, "You're lying." "No, no, Mom, it's really true." "You're lying." "No, no, no. Why do you say that? How do you know?" "It's written on your forehead." So the first time she said that, I went to the bathroom and I looked in the mirror. And I went there, I said, "There's nothing written on my forehead." What does this mean? Violence is a distortion of energy, and people feel that. It's the same with lying. So my mom intuitively feels I'm lying. And she would just say, "It's written on your forehead." Like Pinocchio, the nose is growing. Nobody's nose is growing. It's just symbolical. Why do we lie? Why do we lie? If you'd ask honestly, you would say, "Well, no, I prefer not to lie." And yet we do it all the time. Not only to other people, to ourselves. Why do we lie? To make a difficult situation easy. To take a shortcut. It's the reason why we violate all the yamas. We have the same problem here. It's a subconscious process. There is this little voice inside. There's this little person inside with a hammer. And it's hammering and it's saying, "Hey, it's okay, you know. Why make it difficult if you can make it easy?" The problem is, there are many problems. In the short term, it may seem that you made a complex issue or a difficult situation easier in the short term. In the long term, it will always come back to haunt you. It doesn't stand. Sooner or later, the lie comes out. You got your car back already? So fast. His car was towed.
What?
Amazing that you got it back so quickly. Anyway. How do you react? Or better, how do you feel when people lie to you? It feels really bad, doesn't it? And what it does, it destroys trust. It destroys respect. It destroys synergy, relationships. So actually what seems to be a quick fix to a complex issue, simply by taking a shortcut, telling a lie, has huge repercussions. Like violence, it hits you back. we are not alone in this world. And alone you cannot accomplish anything. But if you lie, people do not want to associate with you. People do not want to be friends with you, or colleagues, or partners. So you're on your own, eventually. The opposite is also true. Telling the truth is often very inconvenient, very difficult, very hard. But when people realize that you're honest, trustable, reliable, they want to be with you. They want to work with you. They want to help you when you need help. And they feel respect for you. Not only that, people who lie, they lose respect for themselves. They lose self-respect. So you can feel their energy. Even if they haven't said a word, intuitively you already feel whether a person is reliable or not, trustable or not. You do. You don't pay attention to it because you're not used to paying attention consciously to subtle signals, but you do. Subconsciously, intuitively. And you act and react accordingly, also subconsciously. Violence is also a shortcut. Just to achieve something in an instant. It's human nature to be impatient. We always want things to happen yesterday, not today or next week, yesterday. That's human nature. It leads to violence. It leads to lying too. So to be non-violent and truthful, we need to take the long road. We need to do effort. We need to work. And it again starts with being conscious of our tendency to make things easier by taking a shortcut. It will have huge repercussions in your life. Huge benefits in the long term. You know, most philosophies and religions, including yoga, proclaim that you will become materially wealthy if you practice truthfulness. Now you think, as a New Age thought, how does a philosophy, a spiritual practice talk about material wealth? But it is a very natural consequence. When you do right, when you do good, good things come to you naturally. Synergy occurs with other people, and together you can achieve much more than you can do on your own. So you may not see it, but in the long term there is a huge payback, a huge practical benefit. Of course, we do not do it for that, but that is a promise for the future. Now, like with violence, we lie a lot to ourselves, as well as that we are violent to ourselves. When you close your eyes and you meditate, that is one of the things that you start becoming aware of. All that chatter that normally is subconscious, that normally you are not aware of, you become aware of. And I gave you the example of drinking a glass of wine, knowing that you better not take the second one, but somewhere inside your mind, the little guy with the hammer comes with 10 excuses telling you that it's okay to have the other glass of wine. Now, wine, alcohol, is of course a very obvious example, but we do this with everything in life. Even you can put non-violence and non-lying together, you will even find an excuse, a lie, for being violent. You subconsciously make up excuses that it's okay to behave like that. So a human being is very complex. And complex in a way that we do not realize. So yoga, you know that Eastern philosophy, including, of course, yoga, Buddhism, Hinduism, is based on the idea that life is suffering. Christianity too. But a very fatalistic way of dealing with that. You just say, well, you know, the holy books say that life is suffering, so I'll just have to suffer. Yoga says, no, don't be stupid. Keep your eyes open, pay attention. What do you feel? Why do you act like you do? Why do you say what you do? Why? Start turning subconscious into conscious by using the framework as yoga is presenting us, the exercise, meditation, very valuable, simple tool. And do the hard work. To be non-violent requires that we do effort to avoid it, to not participate in it anymore when it surrounds us, when situations we end up draw us in, as it usually does, simply refusing. It's the same with truthfulness. Refuse to go along with that. And if it's difficult, start applying it in your yoga practice. When you do asana, you feel pain. It's a form of violence. It's an indication there is violence, which leads to the disruption of harmony. So you can start applying Yama in your asana practice, in your meditation also. But asana practice is the most practical, easiest way to start applying it. How do you apply truthfulness in asana practice? You know, you open a yoga book, and there is a yogi in that book with 30 years of experience. Sometimes they are former ballet professionals or gymnastic professionals, and they present you with photos with the most perfect poses. You are a beginner, you buy that book, you will start practicing yoga, and you, so painful, it's so stiff, and I'm worthless, I'm terrible, and that's a lie from both sides. First, the author of the book is presenting a perfect image that 99.9% of the people in this world will never be able, even after 20 years of yoga, will never be able to reach. But it starts with the self. When you practice asana, be aware of the inclination to make a perfect pose. And when you try to do that, be aware of the pain that it causes. First physical, but mental, the frustration, not being able to do it. How do you deal with that? Be honest. I'm just a beginner. That person in these photos, in this book, has a background, perfectly developed body through gymnastics, ballet, what have you, or yoga. It's not fair to myself to expect me to be able to do that. Moreover, Some of you have called me before this course to ask, can I join? Actually, I'm just a beginner and I'm, not so good at it and stiff. And my answer is, yes, our yoga is not about a perfect pose. Because yoga is not about the perfect pose. The pose is only a tool. And it only works if you do it correctly. The moment you try to be perfect in your pose, you harm yourself. You're deluded into thinking that you could even possibly copy or emulate such a perfect pose. What is important to understand is that as long as there is the effort of you trying to do a pose, it really doesn't matter what it looks like. It really doesn't matter if it's a perfect pose or not, as long as you try. Honesty, truthfulness here means simply to do the best you can with the condition that you are in, and that's it. And if you can approach it in that way, you can feel really good about yourself when you're done with your practice, as opposed to the frustration that you feel, the failure that you think you are, when you have tried to achieve a perfect pose. And all the suffering that comes with it. Truthfulness, human beings are very visual focused. I have 2 dogs. They don't believe their eyes. They believe their nose. Their nose is very, very strongly developed. But human beings are vision focused. So we live in a world, a commercial world, where people make money, people run businesses by visual delusion, visual lies. The whole marketing industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, is based on lying to you that you need a product for which you have to pay so that I can become rich. So don't get me wrong, if you have a business, you have to earn a living so that you can eat, pay the rent, and what have you. You take a shortcut, you lie to your customers. But your customers will not return to you when they realize that you have deluded them, lied to them. On the other hand, when you have a business and you do effort, you try at least to be as honest as possible to your customers, people feel you are doing business differently than others who constantly lie to me. What a nice businessman or woman. I want to go back there next week. And I'm going to tell my friends about it. This is where honesty leads to material wealth. Be aware that many of us are not fully aware of who we are. It sounds a little bit strange, but because we are visually centered, we create an image of ourselves, we identify ourselves with what we see. So, children, of course, they have a hero. They have somebody they admire. That can be a singer, that can be a sports person, that can be a teacher. Some children admire their elementary school teacher. But when we identify with somebody or something, we start acting like that something or somebody. When I was a teenager, I admired Bruce Lee very much. Bruce Lee has given many years after his death, his legacy is empowering many young boys, giving them a sense of pride, a sense of purpose. Because that is the character that he portrays in his movies. Strength and honesty, justice, protecting and defending the weaker people. So I came to Korea because of my interest in Hapkido, which is a Korean martial art. So I know what's going on in the martial art world. And these days, martial art is very public with UFC. So many of those people's story comes out, interviews and what have you. And the story is very often the same. Many now adult men became interested in martial arts because of Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee made martial arts popular around the world. Bob Marley made reggae music popular around the world. Iyengar, many years ago, long before Bruce Lee and Bob Marley, made yoga accessible on a global scale. So it's natural for us to not only identify but feel empowered. So again, there is no good and bad. But it's not helpful anymore when we grow up and we are stuck in that image. We are not able to outgrow that identification. Because that identification overshadows your true self. Let me give you an example, another. I have two very lovely sisters. They're twins. I have three sisters, one older one and two younger than me who are twins. They're blonde, blue eyes. They've always had a lot of attention from the beginning. First of all, because they are twins, because they are girls, and they are pretty. They still have dinner with their elementary school, first grade teacher on a fairly regular basis. That's 50 years ago. So popular they were. When they reached middle school, high school, they became part of a group that identified with each other and with pop culture, of course. That's what teenagers do. But this group was so tight-knit. They still meet. They still, whenever they can, they still meet. They go to concerts together. They eat dinner in each other's homes together. Some have children, some don't. They go to the coffee shop together. That was, when they were teenagers, the place to catch up after school. The coffee shops in Holland sell other things than coffee. But there is one silver lining with this group. The men, all the boys in that group, I admired Bruce Lee, they admired The Godfather. You had this whole series of movies about the mafia. And they all, they had all the videos, and then later all the videos were replaced by all the CDs. How they do it now, I don't know. But they have all the movies. And every time they meet, they watch those movies. And they started behaving like Don Corleone and his cronies. They started behaving like gangsters. There are guys that when they were teenagers, they were really nice, spontaneous guys. Now they have a shaven head and they look very angry all the time, and as if they have a gun in their pocket and they're going to shoot. Which they don't. But they're totally drowned in the idea that they are a movie star, that they are a gangster, that they are, and maybe some of them, commit small crimes, but they don't kill people, they don't rob banks, they just maybe some petty crimes or so, selling some stolen goods, or some of them are, in Holland of course you have the marijuana trade, so some of them may be involved in that on a small scale, but nothing far from all the violence and billion-dollar crimes that you see in those movies. Why is this important? Because we as human beings all have this tendency, because it kind of makes us feel empowered. And especially if you share that with a group of friends, you empower each other in the process. That is why they keep meeting, although they are now in their 50s and their 60s, they're still behaving like middle school boys and girls. And they're lovely people, don't get me wrong. I'm not being judgmental, but I hope that you can, with a kind of an extreme example, that you can recognize that this is actually rather human to do this. And why is this important for us? It's a lie. And as long as we keep imagining to be something that we are not, we have no access to who we truly are. And yoga will connect you with that self with a capital S. In a couple of weeks we will discuss one of the niyamas, which is self-study. Then I will explain in detail what that entails. But it is actually a natural process. In fact, I should add that the practice of non-violence and the practice of truthfulness or non-lying is also a natural process when you start practicing and studying yoga. Why? Simply because you become aware of it from now on. And simply because you realize that violating these principles leads to conflict, leads to unhappiness, leads to disharmony, failure. So, who doesn't want to feel happier, more harmonious? Everybody wants that. Until now, we just didn't know that we had a choice, that we actually could control that. From now on, we know, but we have to work for it. We have to keep our eyes open, pay attention, be alert. I told you at the introduction today that I'm a little bit all over the place. I seem to be the opposite of what people think about yogis. Because people think about yogis that they are very, very relaxed. And many yogis, because they identify with being a yogi, they pretend to be very relaxed. When they talk to you, they slant their eyes as if they have just smoked marijuana. And they say, hey man, cool, you practice yoga too? Yeah, me too, man, I practice yoga for 20 years. And they think by portraying that kind of image, that confirms their status as a yogi. What they don't know is that yoga is about energy. And if you are a long-term yoga practitioner, you are bustling with energy, you are sparkling with energy. you're passionate, you're enthusiastic, you're inspired. So when a yogi talks to you like that, then you must ask yourself whether it's actually, something other going on there. But human beings do this all the time, me included. We have a tendency to identify with something because it gives us something to hold on to. But yoga will empower you instead of those delusions, fantasies. Yoga emancipates. You know what that means? Emancipation? Emancipation means that you will become your own power, your own independent. You become your own strength. That is what emancipation means. And that is only possible away from those identifications. So who am I? I'm wrong? Okay, I can have peace with that. Yogacharya. What does that mean? Someday I was given the title Yogacharya. I didn't ask for it, I didn't pursue for it, I didn't expect it. I was given the title Yogacharya. Of course, if I advertise my yoga, I mention it. But I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good about titles at all, qualifications. But people have to know where you're coming from. People have to know what they can expect from you. So, okay, I'm a Yogacharya. I'm not. Even my name is not really me. Of course, who I really am, that's a complex issue. You will, by the end of this course, you will have a pretty good picture about who I really am, but you cannot put that in words. It's a feeling, it's a vibration, it's a quality. And this is what people usually do, I am an authority in yoga with all my experience and being truly initiated into the secrets of yoga. I have a title of Yogacharya. When I came to Korea, there was no yoga in Korea except for one or two obscure yoga schools. It was not popular at all. By now, I could have had an imperium with 100 schools all over, spread all over Korea, based upon my experience and my titles and what have you. That is what normal people do. That is what other yoga people have done. I can't. Because it feels like a lie. I want to keep myself busy with the essence of yoga, the essence of life, the essence of myself. You know what happens if I pursue, out of greed, to have 100 or 150 yoga centers spread out all over the country based upon my reputation? I'm not a yogi anymore. I've just become an ordinary businessman wanting to be rich. You know Bikram? Bikram yoga? Everybody knows Bikram, right? No? Yeah, he's forgotten because of the abuse scandals that occurred. But Bikram developed hot yoga. And it's very strict. It's a set of exercises that you just keep repeating. There are no additional exercises and very expensive. To become a teacher, you pay like $5,000. And then you have to pay for the right to teach. So, Bikram, gigantic yogi. No, he's not a gigantic yogi. He's a smart businessman. At the time, when the opportunity was there, he took the opportunity. And he said, here I am. I'm a yogi. And this is my system. And it's very special. And everybody wanted to learn, and he became very, very rich. It's strange that you never have heard of Bikram. Bikram, a couple of years ago, came in the news because of sexual abuse of students. And because he's so famous, CNN gave him an opportunity to explain himself in an interview. And he just made it worse. He just made it worse. So arrogant, blaming the victims. And since then, he's gone. He violated all the yamas and the niyamas. He may never have heard of those principles. And it made him successful in the beginning, in the short term. In the long term, his life is full of misery. Me, I don't even have a yoga studio. But all studio owners are suffering like crazy because of the coronavirus. I'm doing very well. Because I don't have a studio. Imagine I would have established 100 studios all over the country. What a misery I would have now, going bankrupt. Everyday headache, sleepless nights. That's not what life is about. That's not what yoga is. Yoga is a science of life. Life in itself sometimes gives me a headache and sleepless nights. And then I have to think about what, like I'm telling you, pay attention, be alert. I have to ask myself, how did I get here? Why am I suffering, getting sleepless nights? And I figure it out. And I get better and better at it. So my classes also get better and better. I'm constantly changing as a human being and constantly changing I become a better teacher, I become a better human being as a result of my process of life. And I live it in the way that I'm teaching you to do. By undergoing life from now on, same as you did before, but with one difference, you start doing it consciously. You start paying attention. And you base it on a framework that we present here. In your own way, free to interpret it in your own way, your own creativity, but certain guidelines. And you immediately start seeing changes taking place. Immediately you start seeing improvements taking place. I told you I came to Korea because of my interest in Hapkido, so I identified with that for a couple of years. So I have some Dutch Hapkido buddies in a WhatsApp chat group, and we attended this Hapkido gym in Amsterdam 86, 87, 89, 88, 89. So that's more than 30 years ago. And you know, young guys mainly, some girls, young guys, always making foolish jokes and fun, and well, you know, I moved on. And Hapkido, I still have contact with my Hapkido teacher because he's Korean and he lives in Korea. And I attended his studio the first 3 years that I was here. But I moved on. And those jokes, they still, after 35 years, they're still making the same stupid jokes about that we made when we were in our 20s. So their bodies got older. They became Dutch ajoshis. Their bodies got older, but their mind is still in the past. That's a lie. Like, I am not a yogi or a yogacharya. They are not Hapkido. A conclusion that I made long time ago already. Of course, I can't tell them that. But it's sad to see that the majority of the people have a tendency to do just like that. We stay stuck in the past. In Korea, you have a good example in the people resist the draft, the military draft, because all young boys have to go to the army. So we complain. Oh, I'm losing 2 years of my life, and horrible to go to the army, and it's not fair. But then, 30 years after the army, they're still talking about the army. What a great time we had, and we did this and we did that, and and even there are workmen, so people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they're still wearing their military fatigues, their military uniform. Identification, still living in the past. It's a lie. Why is this important for us? Because a human being is a very dynamic organism with a huge potential. But it is a potential that hardly ever employs, that hardly ever starts to bloom. And the reason why it doesn't manifest is because we stay stuck in identifications, in lies, fantasies. Interestingly, if you come to the point that you leave those identifications behind, you very naturally start to manifest, spontaneously start to manifest. Emancipation means liberation. Liberation from what? From all the ideas that you have. If you've read the handout, you see that we call all these ideas lies. And I warn you, for the marketing industry, they make huge money out of you, presenting you with lies. You need a Prada handbag. $700, please. Yeah, because if you have a Prada handbag, you belong to the crowd, Gangnam Style. You look like a rich woman, you need a Ferrari. It's a little bit more expensive. Cigarettes. Why do we smoke? Cigarettes are horrible. I started smoking as a child. Why? Because all the adults were smoking. My parents were smoking. I remember clearly when we lived on the 5th floor without elevators, so you had to go all the way up the stairs. So that is not relevant to this story, but when family would visit, the living room would be full of people and everybody smoking. The whole room was filled with a fog of blue smoke from the tobacco, and it smelled nice. And because it smells nice, as a child, you become interested. And the moment you can, you will light a cigarette and you will cough your lungs out. Horrible, painful. And in spite of the pain, you will light another one. You think it's cool because all the adults are doing it. And you want to be, as a child, you can't wait to grow up. You want to be free as an adult to be able to do what you can do. So children who spend lots of time in the street, if they can do something that adults do that they are actually not allowed to, they will do it anyway. Behind the church or behind the school building or in the park, you have your places, your secret places where you go. Why did we do it? While it caused pain in the throat and the lungs and coughing and tears from the eyes. What? Because of the delusion, the thought that, hey, this is cool. The Marlboro cowboy. We will come back to the Marlboro cowboy when we talk about the chakras. The Marlboro cowboy sitting on his white horse with a cigarette. That image made Marlboro the most popular, the most profitable cigarette brand in the world, all around the world. The Marlboro Cowboy died from lung cancer because he smoked 2 packs a day himself. That's what delusion does. Fashion is a delusion. You know, you're probably too young for this, but when I was a teenager, there were 2 very popular series on TV. The one was called Dallas, and the other was called Dynasty. So I always called them in one breath, Dallas and Dynasty, because it was both about rich people in the oil industry in America, what's the capital of Texas?
Dallas.
Yes, Dallas and Houston. Those people were bathing in money, luxury, huge houses with very luxurious interior. At that time, people in my neighborhood, they wanted to have luxurious interior just because they saw it on TV. Even though they couldn't afford it, they would just go to the bank and get a loan. People with no money to spare would have a $100 haircut to look fancy, to look like Jackie Collins. That is what it does. We as yogis, we don't have the luxury to be distracted like that. There's so much we need to discover. So when you start emancipating, you will also start realizing what you really want in this life. And you will also find out that that is not related, probably, it can, but probably not, related to your education, or your upbringing, or your culture. So you have to reinvent yourself. You have work enough to do. So let go of all those identifications. It's a distraction, it absorbs your energy, and it keeps you away from being who you really can be, which goes far beyond your imagination. You will see. I started practicing yoga at the age of 20. It's the best thing I ever did in my life. And adopting 2 dogs. I will tell you about the dogs soon too, because they're such a big part of my life. When I started practicing yoga, sattva occurred. I started connecting with my heart's content. I developed a vision of the future. That is not a concrete image, but you have a feeling of where you want to be in 30 years' time, 40 years' time, 30 years' time. It's all coming to fruition. And I'm from a poor background, big family, 7 kids, with a dad who was a truck driver, so not a wealthy family at all. So low self-esteem. Mentally, intellectually, I never believed in myself and that I was capable of doing all those things. But in my heart, and those are 2 different entities, do you understand that? In my heart, I knew where I was going all the time. Far beyond my wildest dreams, in fact. And I did. And you can too. But it takes time. I'm 57 this month. And it took all that time to get there. And it will take another 20, 30 years. And by the time I die, I probably still feel I'm not done yet. But we will have another life after this. where we can continue the struggle. Is this important? Yes. I took control of my own destiny. I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. My oldest brother has always been on his own, kind of. The oldest. Then came sister, and then came 3 brothers in a row, every year one. So we did everything together. I'm the youngest of the 3, so I always followed them. We did everything together. We always played outside together. My brother's friends were my friends, etc. And all the naughty things that we did, like starting to smoke and many, many things, naughty things. Those 2 brothers, they died both in their mid-40s. Because of habits that started as child. And I was part of that. As a child, teenager, young adult, you don't see the destruction that you're causing to yourself. And you become addicted to that. It's difficult to stop living like that if you've lived like that since you were a child. When I started practicing yoga, I very clearly saw, not with my physical eye, but I very clearly saw where we were all going. And I saw that it would lead to self-destruction. I even predicted that we would die in our mid-40s if we didn't change. I changed. I took control. I tried to change them too. It didn't work. Because people are not interested in yoga or, advice if they don't ask for it. You came here voluntarily. So you're willing to listen, although you sometimes don't agree with me, but you're willing to listen. My brothers never. They didn't see what I saw. But I'm still alive because of yoga, because I saw something they couldn't see. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Without yoga, I would have died in my mid-30s, in my mid-40s too. Bad habits, alcohol, drugs, what have you. I'm totally the opposite. But I was not until I found yoga. It's all to do with truthfulness. Who are you? What do you want? Another story. That will be the last one. After I discovered yoga, I had to totally renovate myself, my life. And that was not easy because just human. Sometimes you fall back to old habits. So I dropped out of yoga class with Ajita. I dropped out of school because I started going to night school after work. So I called Ajita and I said, Ajit, I have a problem. Can I come and talk with you? Then reluctantly he agreed. Then he invited me just before dinner so that I wouldn't have much time to talk. I will explain why. I arrived and he said, sit down. He had this 2-seat IKEA sofa, a small one, so 2-seat, sit down. And he sat next to me and he said, Ron, tell me. So I started talking about my worries about my brothers, my frustrations, just, a load of problems basically. He didn't let me talk for more than a minute. He said, Ron, wait a minute. What do you want? Don't talk about your problems. What do you want? Don't talk about your past. What do you want? So I said, I want to go to Korea. Then he said, what do you need to do for that? So I said, I need to finish my education and training with you. I need to finish my evening school. And I need to save enough money so that I can stay there at least for 2 years. So he said, okay, go to work. Come back to class. Register again with the night school that you attended and dropped out. And keep saving money from the money that you earn from work. And that's exactly what I did from that moment on, and it's the best advice I ever got in my life. What is the problem here? I kept identifying with my past. I kept being sucked back in the past. We call that karma. It's very tragic because it does not allow you to move on, to move forward. And in spite of the fact that I discovered yoga, I got stuck again and again. And if not for Ajita, I might have actually failed miserably. So that's the best advice he ever gave me, I ever got from anybody. Don't talk about your past, don't talk about your problems. What do you want? What do you want? How can you do that? Now go to work. 3 elements. What do you want? How do you do that? How do you get there? And then go to work. Just focus on that. That's not easy, because you keep being sucked back. But now you had that conversation. Every time you're in trouble, you remember. And you say to yourself, hey, don't go back to the past. Stop thinking about all those issues. Move forward. That's what I did. And from that moment on, I manifested all the things that I set out to do. So we'll talk about that further down the road. It's very personal also. That's truthfulness. Truthfulness and consciousness of your subconscious mind that keeps you imprisoned in an emotion, in a worst case, karma, or a fantasy, fashion, an image, the Marlboro cowboy, Bruce Lee, Don Corleone. We're all human and we all do this, and we all become a prisoner of this without knowing it. And we have a luxury problem here. We are comfortable relatively. The Netherlands, Korea, relatively comfortable life we can live, which gives us the room to live a fantasy. Because if you're not comfortable and you have to struggle to survive, you have other things on your mind than identifying with Don Corleone or Bruce Lee or Madonna for that matter. You can. You see what I'm talking about? You have questions? Yeah?
How do you break from identifying with something that had a really big impact on your life, like maybe a really negative impact on your life?
How do you leave that behind? First of all, by pay attention to what you feel and how it makes you feel. There is an unavoidable stage that we need to go through, and that is the stage of becoming conscious. Because the alternative is to oppress it or ignore it or deny it. And that makes things worse in the long term. So first there is the becoming conscious process, and that can be very, very painful. But it's a little bit early, as it is the first class, and we would address that issue several times during this course, but because you asked, that demands an answer. Yeah, that's truthfulness. look, the reason why we struggle with traumatic experiences is because of the emotion that comes with it, which is again identification. And as human beings, that is why people suffer from PTSD. That is why people who suffer severe trauma generally get stuck in life, even to the point of self-destruction. So I lost the thread a little bit, wait. It is the emotion that does not allow us to deal with it in a rational way. There's pain, there's emotion. In yoga we learn there is no good and there is no bad. And that sounds a little bit frivolous maybe if you have experienced something traumatic. But the point is that everything in life has a purpose. And things that we label as bad can turn into something we label good. But that requires effort. For example, you're in school and you're being bullied, which is very traumatic for children. Some children cannot overcome the pain of the bullying and they end up with self-destructive behavior. Some children who have parents that help them to rationalize things, who have support, emotional support, they turn into successful adults and they are fueled by their traumatic experience. So it can go both ways. And it is very difficult, but if you understand it, you can choose. There are CNN. I watch BBC and CNN to stay informed on what is happening around the world. CNN has those sections where they interview special people. People who do something extraordinary. And it's often people that have been initially severely traumatized because of war, because of sexual abuse, because of other traumatic experiences. They have come to a point where they accept what has happened and actually they become passionate about doing something in their life and with their life that is fueled by the trauma. And that is where the expression comes from: if life presents you lemons, you make lemonade. So not easy. It's a little bit early to go into that, but we will certainly come back to this. It's an important part of yoga, really, to deal with past traumatic experiences. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Okay, let's have a short break, then we'll continue with Asana. Oh, one more thing important. Is Jasmine still there?
No, she's not here.
Okay.
I think she'll be next.
Yeah, after the break then.